Hello and welcome back to another great video. Today we are going to see how you can set up global CORS in a Spring Boot application. To the ones who are visiting this channel for the first time, make sure you like, subscribe and click all different buttons that you see on the screen so that we can be a better engineer together. Cool. So here I have already written a Medium article for all of you guys to follow. So if you guys prefer reading articles instead of watching videos, you can go to that, which is linked in the description, or you can just tag along for this video and know the same. Cool. Uh, all right. So let's go ahead and see what we have in play today. So I'm pretty sure in every full stack or backend engineer or front-end engineer's life, you have come across this hell of a problem called CORS. Now let us see what exactly does this mean and why we have to deal with it and how do we finally resolve it in a Spring Boot backend application. Cool. So CORS itself stands for cross-origin resource sharing, right? Now, this sounds like a bunch of gibberish that is too difficult to comprehend. So let's break it down in simple parts. So first is cross-origin, which here refers to different domains, right? So cross means different and origin means domain. So what domain are we talking about here? I'm talking about a URL, right? Basically, a web link on which a particular something is hosted, right? So right now just keep in mind that something is hosted and at two different links, and we are talking about an interaction between these two different links or domains, right? So different domains cross origin. Then as I told you, CORS. So what's the R in CORS? R stands for resource. Now resource here can mean any piece of information hosted on an IP, right? So IP here stands for internet protocol, or URL for simple understanding, right? A resource can be a database, it can be a backend server, or it can be any other piece of software that provides you with some information, some response, or some action, some way of interacting with it, right? So that is a resource. Now, the last part, the S of course, is sharing. Sharing basically means sharing, right? The sharing of resources. Now, when you put all of these together, cross origin resource sharing, that means a mechanism for sharing resources across different domains, at least two domains, right? Two different domains. Cool. So one key part of this CORS mechanism are the CORS policies. Now policies, as you know, are just a set of rules in a system. Similarly, CORS policies are set of rules through which the applications must abide when accessing resources on different domains, right? So if there are two resources, resource 1 and resource 2, and they're trying to communicate with each other, and all both of these are on different domains, then they have to follow the CORS policies, or the rules that we have defined called the CORS policies, right? Now you might be wondering what type of rules, right, Apurva? What rules should be there? Why do we even care about these rules? So let me give you an example, right? Some basic example of a CORS policy would be what type of domains are allowed to access a resource. So for example, you have created an application and your application has a database. Now you would only want your website to access your database and no other, right? You wouldn't want a hacker to hack into your database and gain access to the information inside. So that's why what you do, you restrict your database CORS to a particular domain so that all the requests that are coming from this secured domain, secure IP, would be allowed and anything else would be discarded or blocked. So this is one example of how you can use CORS policy to strengthen your security, strengthen your application against all different attacks happening on the internet. Cool. So if you remember right, I told you the requests coming from an incorrect IP would be blocked, right? So if you have used a third-party API and you have been in the industry for some time, then you might have already came across an issue similar as this one, right? So here you can see that someone here is using a joke API, right? And it has been blocked by the policy because we are making a request from localhost 3000, right? Which is a different domain. And it seems like they haven't really set up CORS, or they haven't really allowed localhost 3000 to access this particular API, this particular IP. So this is just one example about how you might observe CORS error in your browser or in your website or web application. Now, before we start solving this problem, let us first create the problem. Let us first replicate the problem. See when does this actually exist, right? Cool. So to do that, I have created a simple Spring Boot REST API. Right. So let me just take you there and show you what do I actually mean. Cool. So here you can see that we are in my Eclipse, and let me just show you the application that I have made. So this is the CORS POC application that I have made. The name is pretty self-explanatory, right? So it only has two classes right now. One is our root CORS POC application class, which is basically which comes with a Spring Boot application, right? So I didn't really do anything here. The other class that I have is a POC controller, right? So it is a REST controller that has only one API called get mapping, right, slash test. So basically we are creating a get request at slash test route. And what will happen when I hit this particular IP? I will get a simple text called test return, right? Since fair enough, nothing is too complex, right? Also make sure that you have this particular dependency installed in a Spring Boot application. Since you are making REST APIs, you should have this because it comes with all different annotations, it comes with all different classes or methods that make the REST APIs possible, right? So the dependency name is Spring Boot Starter Web. And yeah, make sure you have it. Even further, when we are going to set up our global CORS, we will be taking help of this particular Spring Boot library or dependency, right? So yeah, so let us simply go and start up our application and see what happens. Okay, so here I have just started up my application. It takes just a few seconds to get it up, booted up. So you can see some stuff is happening, and finally you can see here that we have started our CORS application at port 8080, right? So my Spring Boot application is live on 8080. Now let us try to hit this particular get API that we have made from a Next.js application, which is hosted on a different IP. So when I say on a different IP, I would simply just host the Next.js application on a different port. So that way it will create a different URL for the front-end application that is in Next.js, and the backend application would be at port 8080. So as I told you, we have different domains, right? So when they are trying to interact with each other, they should create a CORS error, or basically it should block a request coming from the front-end application to the backend application being from different URLs. So now this is good in theory. Let's test out whether what we are saying actually makes any sense, right? So here we are on my VS Code. You can see that it's just a simple next application. I have done nothing here. I have just created a very simple class called home, and home has nothing. It has just printed CORS POC in the division, right? But one thing to really see here is in my use effect, I am calling an API, right? And what API would that be? You are right. Basically, I am calling my localhost 8080 slash test. Cool. So this should basically make hit my backend application and either return me a response or block my request and return a CORS error. So let us see what exactly happens, right? Okay. So as I told you, the front end application is hosted at localhost 3000. So let us go there and try to hit it. All right. So here we are back in our browser, and I will be trying to hit my create next app. For the first time when you're trying to load next web page, it can take a few seconds, but be patient with me. We are going to make this happen. Okay. So it is compiling right now. Let us wait for a few seconds and see what exactly happens. Meanwhile, we can open up our network tab, right? So here you can see in my network tab. Oh, one second. Yeah. Hopefully you are able to see this. So here in my network tab, we are hitting the test localhost test API that I had created, right? HTTP localhost 8080 test, and you can see that there is no response, and the reason for the status is basically a CORS error, right? CORS, and you can see here the name as well matches what we were talking about. That is a cross origin resource sharing error, and the reason it is saying that we have an error is because we are missing allow origin header. So if you remember right, I told you guys that one of the basic applications of a CORS policy is telling the backend application what IPs can basically access the resource, right? So to do that, what we do is we send a list to our CORS policies called the allow origins, right? So these are the origins that are allowed to hit our particular resource. So now we know what happens when we hit a request. Basically, we try to interact between resources at two different domains. So now let us try to resolve the problem using our Spring Boot application. Cool. So I guess it's time we move back to our Eclipse. And here we are back to Eclipse. And so to get started, I would really recommend everybody to basically create a package called config. I usually like to keep my whole Spring Boot project in basically in well-mannered way, right? So that I know what else is happening where. So in config, I will create all the configuration files. In controller package, I'll create all the controller files and so on. Cool. So let us go ahead, create a class called CORS config. All right. So I've created a simple class called CORS config. Now at the top of this particular class, I will mark it with an annotation called @configuration. Now, why is this necessary? Because @configuration marks our class's configuration class. So what that means is basically your particular class will be responsible for creating beans. And when the Spring Boot application starts, it will specially go inside this particular class to check for any beans that are created. And it will populate those beans across the application wherever necessary. So the ones who are new to Spring Boot, a bean basically you can assume as an auto-created object that or a default object for a particular class. So wherever a class object is created and you have not really provided it with a special object, it will be populated with the default object that we had created, that we have created. Now, this object is basically your bean, right? Hope that was simple enough. And I believe if you are already this deep into Spring Boot, you might already know what a bean is. All right. Now we need to do one more thing, right? We need to implement web MVC configurer, right? So this class is important because this interface is important because this interface comes along with one special method that lets you define your CORS policies. And that method is, so let me just go ahead and show you what that method is. So the name of the method is basically add CORS mapping, right? So I'll just go ahead and type it for you, add CORS mapping, right? Make sure to mark this particular method with an override annotation since we are overriding this, oops, spelling is wrong, right? An override annotation since we are overriding this method which is actually part of the interface web MVC configurer. All right, now there's one more thing that this particular method accepts as a parameter, and it is called CORS registry. CORS registry. All right, let me just fix the spelling for you guys. I hope this is how you spell CORS registry. CORS, yeah, CORS registry. All right. So CORS registry is important because this object is the one that comes with the more granular, or I would say more accurate methods that will tell you how to set up specific parts of a CORS policy. So it will help you in specifying your allow origins, for example, right? There are n number of things that you can do with CORS policies. So for each different activity or different operation or different rule, you would need a different method, which comes from this CORS registry object. So let us try to use it. So I have just written CORS registry. I don't know why I keep messing up the spelling, right? Now in CORS registry, you can see the first thing that we have is an add mapping object. So let us use that. Now what add mapping object, why is it important? So this particular add mapping object will accept a string, right? Which is a path parameter or path pattern, right? Now what type of path this will be? This will be path of your REST API. So if you use a regular expression such as star slash star star, right? So this means, or even if you just use slash star star, right? So this means any REST API hosted on slash and after that any string, any text or no text at all, the respective CORS policies that I will be setting up to this registry would be populated there. So if you remember right, our particular API that we created was of format slash test, right? So let me just comment this for you guys. Okay, so the particular format was slash test, which obviously fits in this particular pattern. There's a slash and there's something else that is your test, correct? So any CORS policies that are set here will then be populated with on the slash test REST API that I have created. So let us waste no more time and add some CORS policies, right? So if you remember, the error that we got was you would have missing allowed origins. So let us add some origins, right? So I'm using a method called allowed origins. Now inside allowed origins, it accepts an array of strings. But for me, I just want my Next.js application to be able to access this particular resource or this particular backend API. To do that, I just have to put in the source origin of that particular application that is making the request. So if you remember, our front-end application is hosted at localhost 3000, right? You can see it right here, http localhost 3000. So let's go ahead, copy it. So I've just copied the particular localhost 3000 URL and paste it in our particular Eclipse project, right? So if you see here, I have just pasted in allowed origins the localhost 3000 IP that I wanted. So I hope this makes it pretty clear. We are basically telling our CORS registry or CORS setup to allow the particular IP to make requests to any REST APIs host with this regular expression pattern. Cool. I hope this is very much clear. All right, so here you can see that we have some error here, right? So the error here says that the particular method add CORS mapping is not something that is coming from WebMVC configurer, right? The reason here is because the name of the method is not mapping, it is mappings. So these type of small spelling mistakes can create a big problem because if the name is incorrect, the method will not be overridden and your CORS policies will not be populated across your application. So basically you have now set up your CORS policies for your project and this is all you have to do, man. This is it. By the way, you can do more stuff here. This comes with a hell lot of different methods. You can dive in deeper later, right? You can set up allowed methods which lets you restrict what REST APIs or REST methods we can call on your particular resource. Like if you only want to do allow get requests, you can do that, and you can use some different allowed headers. You can enforce authentication and all different good stuff, right? But let's not dive into that. Basically, this is how you set up your CORS, global CORS setup in your project. Now, the last thing that we need to do is test whether our particular CORS registry that we have done is actually implemented or not. So to do that, make sure you restart your particular application. So here I am restarting my application. Let's wait for it to get booted up. And yeah, it's back live. You can see the CORS application started, port 8080. So let us now go to our Chrome to see whether we are now able to access our REST APIs. You remember last time we have faced a CORS error due to missing allowed origins, but now that we have CORS set up, we should be able to call and get a response from /test. Right? I will just add a filter here so that we only see the test that we are trying to access. So I'll just go ahead, refresh this particular website, and you can see that we have got status 200. The people who don't know, status 200 means the particular REST API was successful. So let me go ahead and see the response. You can see I have got the response that is test, and this makes sure that our project is working properly and we are able to make a request from one domain to another and make sure that this is happening smoothly, and we have resolved the CORS error that we came across due to missing allowed origins. So there's one more way to set up CORS in a project, that is using the annotation @cross origin, but I would not recommend you to go through that route, especially if you're creating a production project, since using the way that we had done it, that is by creating a configuration class, gives you the ability to use the same CORS policies across your whole application instead of setting it specifically for some set of REST APIs and again setting it again for the other set. Instead, if you use the global configuration especially in a production project, you just have to control it from one single place. So that was all for today. Let me know what you think, and if you have any doubt, put it down there, and see you next time.